Democracy That Delivers is brought to you by the Center for International Private Enterprise. Now, to your host.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Jenny Anderson, a Senior Program Officer with the Center for International Private Enterprise on the Asia and the Pacific team. Today's podcast is a part of a CIPE series looking at what's at stake for democracy in the run-up to the Philippines election that will be held on May 9th. Today, we have the special honor of being joined by Dr. Jean Franco. Jean is currently an associate professor of political science at the University of the Philippines. And prior to moving into academia, Jean was the director of the Senate Economic Planning Office. Dr. Franco's research includes gender and politics, legislative politics, and women's rights. Thank you very much for joining us today, Jean.
It's my great pleasure, Jenny.
For our listeners who may not be so acquainted with what's happening in the Philippines, in this run-up to the election, maybe starting with a bigger question, and for our listeners' sake, it's been 3 decades since a people's revolution toppled the elder Marcos, and now his son, Marcos Jr., is in reach of the presidency as we run up to the May elections, and he's leading in the polls. Jean, for our listeners, what's happening in the Philippines, and why is Marcos Jr. in the lead?
Thank you for that question, Jenny. That is also the question of people who are not supporting Marcos. Well, somebody who studies politics, my sense is that the reason why Marcos is leading is because he has invested in revising the history of his family and what they have done to the country. And also that history plays into what is called authoritarian nostalgia. And this has not only happened in the Philippines, other countries have also experienced that. For instance, South Korea, when Park Geun-hye won sometime in 2012, I think. So that's something that's not unique to the Philippines. But what fuels that authoritarian nostalgia is actually disinformation. A study by my colleague in the College of Mass Communication finds that disinformation has become very much prevalent in these elections, and in fact, it can be attributed to the camp of Marcos.
I think what you're saying, definitely, this sort of democratic backsliding, this shift towards authoritarianism. And we find it in many countries, but maybe specifically for the Philippines, like thinking of this strongman model. Like why is this working in the Philippines?
You know, in 2019, the World Values Survey, their results in the Philippines indicate that more than half of the respondents from the Philippines say that men make better leaders than women. The reason why strong men leadership seems to click in the Philippines is borne out by the World Values Survey that was held in the Philippines, and it came out in 2019 or 2020, and it says that more than half of Filipinos think that men make better political leaders than women, and that 70% believes that men have more right to a job than women. So that tells you the appeal of strong men as leaders in the Philippines. And to a large extent, the campaign or the candidacy of Ferdinand Marcos Jr. resonates with this situation. And in fact, to my mind, it is not so much about Marcos Jr., his campaign, as it is about his father and his supposed legacy. And unfortunately, and this is also borne out by the fact that just recently, for instance, Facebook and I think Twitter accounts have been suspended primarily because they were found to be distributing fake news and disinformation in this election season. There are also investigations done by Rappler and also Washington Post, for instance. It recently published a report indicating that this information is really coming from the camp of Marcos, and its primary recipient is Leni Robredo, the only woman presidential candidate. And that even tells you that from the very start, Leni Robredo's campaign would be an uphill climb.
Definitely, definitely. And digging into this a bit more, digging into disinformation and thinking about your expertise and your research, looking at how gender plays a role. How have you seen this disinformation campaign, especially during this campaign period in the run up to the May elections? How do you see gender playing a role in this campaign?
It is definitely a major factor. And thank you for asking that question, because I'm not so sure if discourse or this factor has actually been given much attention by the Philippine media. Disinformation in this campaign is very much gendered, in the sense that disinformation hurled against Leni Robredo is anchored on the fact that the news or the content of this disinformation is made in such a way to discredit her achievements, to discredit whatever she has done for the past 6 years, even to discredit her professional life, in the sense that she is now being portrayed as someone stupid or dumb who cannot even say something substantive. And that's weird, no? Considering the fact that she was a human rights lawyer. She defended farmers. She had a career as a legislator in the House of Representatives, and she was vice president for 6 years. So that's unfortunate, and that's tragic in terms of looking at how women in politics are portrayed.
Definitely. Thank you for that explanation. Thinking back a bit further, thinking about and thinking about the current president, President Duterte, how has the emergence of President Duterte really impacted women's empowerment, women's leadership? Do you see like today's situation with this disinformation, gender disinformation campaign? Is this something that just started in the run up to the May elections? Or is there sort of a pattern that we can see or a trend that's hearkening back to earlier days?
Yeah, definitely the disinformation towards Leni Robredo did not start in this campaign season. In 2016, when Rodrigo Duterte came to power, he already perceived Leni Robredo, who was his vice president, as a threat. And it's just weird and totally unfortunate that state resources were actually used, no, to malign Leni Robredo, because there are people employed in some key government units which sowed disinformation against Leni Robredo, portraying her as inept, incompetent, and not fit to be vice president and even president someday. There are even videos recorded that would show President Duterte uttering words such as, Leni Robredo is not fit to be president because she is a woman and she is too emotional.
It's terrible the way this sort of rhetoric continues. I mean, I think, people sort of watching Democratic space or, looking at Democratic backsliding, especially in Southeast Asia, sort of where there's this systems competition between democracy and increasing authoritarianism or autocracy. And so these elections are really catching the eye of the world and what's going to happen. It seems that President Duterte has exposed the fragility of democratic institutions in the Philippines, that institutions themselves have been weakened under Duterte, but they were still a bit fragile to begin with. I know you've done some work looking at sort of institutions and gender. How do you see democratic institutions being impacted during this time of democratic backsliding from a gendered perspective?
Yeah, no, I think the advent of the Duterte administration has resulted in a wake-up call in most women's groups, because before Duterte we were touted as a country with the most advanced laws on gender equality and women's rights. We were always at the top of World Economic Forum, measure on gender empowerment. But then when Duterte came into power, it sort of opened a can of worms that, it made people realize that, in fact, gender equality outcomes are still also very much a work in progress in the Philippines. And probably the strategy also has to be revised a bit. Instead of just training women so that they are empowered individually, institutions, especially our democratic institutions, must also be, what do you call this, reviewed or revitalized or transformed so they are gender responsive, and that they do not only privilege men in power but would also give more space and meaningful participation of women.
Yeah, definitely. Going back to that, Marcos has a big lead over Vice President Leni Robredo. How do you like the media coverage? I mean, you mentioned, there's been decades of disinformation campaign coming from the Marcos. Is thinking about media coverage, what's been missing, and what are some, there's so many challenges right now thinking about the Philippines that globally there's, this war on truth happening.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
and
yes.
It feels like the Philippines is especially vulnerable. There's studies that show that there's nearly all of the population of the Philippines is online. And then there's been recent reports showing that nearly 50% of the population find it difficult to spot fake news when they see it.
Exactly.
Going back to this incredible lead by Marcos Jr., like what's been missing? Where are some spaces that you think if only we could maybe take some steps forward on these issues, there might be some progress?
Yeah. I'll tell you a story. A week ago, I went to the market, and then I was with people who were talking about the elections. And then suddenly a woman heard me. I was talking about the Marcos and the corruption issues pertaining to the Marcoses. And I was also expressing my dismay that why is it that Marcos Jr. is leading in the surveys? And then suddenly a woman came up to me and said that, I will vote for Marcos Jr. because, and then the woman suddenly uttered, things that I actually read as fake news. I tried to explain, but I did not tell the woman that I teach. I wanted to speak to her as a fellow, as a woman myself. And then the woman said that, and I asked her, where did you find these information? And she said that it's on Facebook. And then I asked her to read other things, get out of Facebook, get out of her echo chamber. And I explained to her some things. And it was just, I was looking at her face, and it was as if she, she had stopped drinking the Kool-Aid, so to speak. Yeah. Yeah, it was terrible. I saw in her face, the mark of a somebody who has been so exposed to fake news and then suddenly been bombarded with the truth.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And I guess that you asked about the reason. I think one is that Facebook in the Philippines is free.
Right.
No? Data, it's free. You can access Facebook for, I think, you can access short videos, but, it's free. If you have an Android phone, that's one. Secondly, a major TV net that has been patronized by a lot of Filipinos have been shut down by the Duterte government. And so a lot of Filipinos have stopped watching TV, meaning to say a lot of Filipinos have stopped watching mainstream media. And the only source of information, especially during the pandemic, would be Facebook. So that tells you a lot. Well, people are also saying that, the educational system has to be revised, reviewed. Of course, there is no one-size-fits-all explanation to all of these, but, these are just my thoughts at the moment.
No, definitely. I've heard, I think from a previous guest that about, education, just the education system in the Philippines, and some of the textbooks themselves that the schools are using have contributed to this burnishing of the Marcos's legacy and talking about life under martial law as being an age of prosperity. Is this something that you found? Is this something that's actually happening, or is it just circumspect?
It's true. I have Yeah, it's true, Jenny. I have seen some of these textbooks and it's just terrible. People have also said that there's very little discussion on the martial law, or if it is discussed in such a way that many ways it's leaning towards the fact that the Marcoses were also victims during that period. So, yeah, and it just resulted in this mess that we are in right now.
Yeah, I mean, you're at a university, thinking of the young people that are your students, or that you're a mentor to. I mean, these people weren't even alive when the elder Marcos was in power.
Exactly.
And the country was ruled under martial law. Like, how are the young people that you're speaking with? How are they viewing, the past of the Philippines and the time under martial law? Are they? I mean, I'm guessing they've read it in the textbooks when they were younger, as well as being active participants on Facebook. But what are you seeing from the university students, or just the youth vote? What are you seeing from them?
Yeah, it's also, I think it already indicates that, like what you said, young Filipinos, they've never experienced martial law. They were born in the 1990s already. And, if you add the fact that they were not exposed to reading about the martial law, then that's a terrible outcome. But in my university, it's okay because most of my students are from schools in which these were discussed. But what we are worried about are Filipinos from low-income groups who did not have the chance to go to some private schools, who would have better quality textbooks. So that's what we are worried about. And in fact, the recent election surveys would tell you that most younger people are actually leaning towards Marcos Jr. So that may be also as a result of the fact that they were not very much exposed to what happened in martial law.
Yeah, and it's also surprising that President Duterte seems like he will leave office with a very strong youth, with strong support from young people, that he's leaving with very high popularity ratings. And now his daughter has joined the team of Marcos Jr. running as, so Duterte's daughter is running as vice president for Marcos Jr. Yeah, it's that two sort of dynastic families have come together, that they have found it in their best interest to run together and not compete. Does this mean anything for the Philippines? Is there something happening that we should be aware of?
Well, if someone is coming from another planet and he or she would ask about the Philippines and to what extent can I explain Philippine politics, my response would be that you have to look at political families, because that's the primary factor that shapes the kind of politics that we have. And indeed, that's what we are seeing right now. Filipinos do not identify themselves with political parties. Political families, personalities are larger than political parties. Political parties are mere vehicles to run for elections, not really, in the ideal sense that it is in some countries.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. It's a good point to make for people to better understand what's happening in the Philippines, that it's more that there isn't a party platform per se, that, a candidate will run on a certain platform that's attached to the party. It's the political families that are involved. Yeah. I mean, just thinking of the Marcos Duterte partnership in the run up to the elections. I mean, with Duterte's daughter running, Sara Duterte, does she have a following? I mean, are people going to, would people be, it seems Marcos is assuming that people want the Duterte legacy to continue, that Marcos felt it was in his best interest. What do you see happening? I mean, with these two political families joining forces with right now, it feels pretty likely that they will be the winners of the presidential election. How do you see Duterte's legacy continuing through with his daughter holding the office of vice president?
Yes. I think, it's very obvious that both of them, and of course, Sarah, is running based also on the supposed legacy or popularity of her father. And even if people are saying that Sara Duterte has a different set of people and aides, she is still her father's daughter. And to a large extent, she's using that, in campaign sorties. She is actually saying that if you want the things that have been started by my father to continue, then you have to vote for me. So she uses it to her advantage in this campaign. No, prior to the Duterte administration, she did not have a national following. She was only known in Davao. So she only rose to prominence, to national prominence, as a result of her father's position. So in fact, both Marcos Jr. and Sara Duterte are running based on both of their father's supposed legacy, not really based on what they have achieved so far, if I can say that.
Yeah, it's quite concerning. In the few minutes that we have left, is there anything, Jean, that you wanted to share with our listeners? Anything else that you weren't at, that I didn't ask you? Speaking of this time in the run up to the election, that, looking at women's rights in the country, is there something else that you feel our listeners should be aware of, or something they should look out for in the run up to the May elections?
This is a consequential election for us. We were supposed to be recovering, from decades of dismal economic growth. But within the past 10 years, we were okay economically, and we were starting to reduce poverty rates. But then with the pandemic, it did not happen. And so we think that this election is very crucial. It's very important that we also have a new set of leaders that can inspire us Filipinos. But with the kind of activism that I have seen among Filipino youth, doing volunteer work, doing house-to-house campaigns, attending rallies for Leni Robredo, my sense is that whoever wins, I think there is now a critical mass of young Filipinos who would someday become leaders, and who would want for the Philippines to have better sets of leaders, to have a good government.
Yes, the youth, we have to hope.
Yes, exactly.
That democracy, that people begin to see. SIPE has a tagline, democracy that delivers. And when democracy is not delivering, it's easy to start looking to strong men, to people who claim to have all the answers, when they're actually maybe working against many people's best interests. In closing, Jean, I know you've been doing research. You have a new book, a chapter in a book that's being published by Routledge coming out soon. You also have a new research brief coming out. Is there anything you'd like our listeners to know about your upcoming work?
The University of the Philippines has a website specifically dealing with elections, with information on the elections. We're also having a Twitter space discussion. So if any of our viewers would like to tune in and would like to know more about the Philippine elections, we have our UP sa Halalan website. We also have a UP sa Halalan Facebook and Twitter account.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Jean Franco, for participating in our What's at Stake for Democracy in the run-up to the Philippines May elections. And we hope to have you back on the podcast sometime, perhaps post-election, to do a roundup of what has happened.
Democracy That Delivers has been brought to you by the Center for International Private Enterprise. For more information, please visit CIPE.org.